Welcome to God's Word, where we explore the timeless stories and profound messages of the Bible. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the narratives that have shaped faith for centuries, revealing the wisdom and guidance they offer for our lives today. Whether you're a long-time believer or just curious about the Christian faith, join us as we uncover the powerful truths and enduring lessons found in Scripture. Subscribe to stay connected and be a part of our community. The moments of rest are perfect for a story that brings peace to your mind. In the heart of an old, bustling city, where the clamour of traffic was a constant hum and the scent of street food hung heavy in the air, lived a young man named Elias. He was a gifted artist, a painter whose canvases told stories of quiet despair and muted colour. His work was critically acclaimed, but a deep, unshakable sorrow had become the wellspring of his art. It was a sorrow that had buried his heart beneath the weight of his grief, a soul that had forgotten the feeling of joy. Elias had been a child of joy, a boy who saw the world in brilliant hues, but a profound loss in his youth had painted his life in shades of grey. He had lost his younger brother, a boy whose laughter had been a melody, whose presence had been a sunbeam. His brother's passing had left a void in Elias's heart that no amount of success, no burst of artistic inspiration could fill. He had tried everything to numb the pain, long nights in his studio, a relentless pursuit of perfection in his art, and a quiet retreat from the world. But the emptiness remained, a spiritual ache that no human effort could mend. He had become, in the truest sense of the word, a vessel of clay, chipped and cracked by the fires of his affliction, with nothing but darkness to contain. One evening, as a thunderstorm lashed against his studio window, a storm that mirrored the one in his soul, Elias sat before a blank canvas. He had no inspiration, only the familiar heaviness in his spirit. He dipped his brush in a jar of black paint, intending to capture the storm's fury, but his hand froze. He felt a deep inner stillness, a sudden quiet that was not of his own making. It was a peace that felt as if the storm had been silenced by a word, as if a voice had said, "Peace, be still." In that quiet, a memory came to him, a sacred memory of his brother. It was a memory of a day when the sun, the very light of the world, had been particularly bright. They were sitting by a small, hidden stream on the outskirts of the city. His brother, with a child's simple wisdom, had picked up a tiny, insignificant stone from the riverbed. It was grey and unremarkable, a piece of the broken, fallen world. But his brother held it up to the light, and a kaleidoscope of colours flashed across its surface. Specks of gold, veins of emerald, and flashes of ruby red. "Look, Elias," his brother had whispered. "Even the most ordinary stones hold a secret garden of colour. You just have to hold them up to the light." The memory was a gift, a moment of profound revelation. Elias looked at the black paint on his brush, and then at the blank canvas. He knew with a deep spiritual certainty that his life was a testament to the words of the Apostle Paul, that we have this treasure in jars of clay, so that the surpassing power may be from God and not from ourselves. His cracked, broken heart was a vessel, and the light his brother had shown him was the treasure within. He put down the black paint and picked up a clean brush. He began to paint with the palest of colours, a soft, ethereal white, a colour of quiet promise, a colour that represented the holy presence that had filled the stillness. He painted the stone from his memory, but he painted it as a heart that was grey and ordinary, a heart that was chipped and cracked, but that held a secret garden of colour within it. He painted specks of gold for his brother's laughter, emerald for the life God gives, and ruby red for the love that redeems. He painted the divine light that had revealed the colour, a soft, pure light that filled the canvas, and then he wrote a single word beneath the painting, lumen, which meant light in Latin. He was reminded of the words in the book of John that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. He knew, with a certainty that was as sure as the sun's rise, that the true purpose of his art was no longer to capture the world's despair, but to reveal the secret gardens of colour hidden within it. His art became a living testimony to the promise of Isaiah, to bestow on him a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. He began to paint with a new purpose. He painted the faces of the street vendors, their weary eyes holding a secret joy, an inner fortitude that came from an unseen source. He painted the lonely, forgotten places of the city, their quiet dignity illuminated by a hidden light. His art began to shine with a luminescence that captivated all who saw it. People would stand before his canvases, their eyes welling up with tears, not of sorrow, but of recognition. They saw their own weary hearts reflected in his art, but they also saw the hidden gardens of color within them, the forgotten joy, the secret hope. They saw their own jars of clay, holding a light that was not their own. Elias's fame grew, and a gallery owner, a shrewd man who had followed Elias's career with great interest, offered him a show. "Your work has a new dimension," the gallery owner said. "It has a quiet power. It is not just about the pain, but about something more. It's about hope." Elias smiled, but he did not speak. He knew the source of his art was no longer his sorrow, but the light of the world, a gift his brother had shown him. A single, humble stone held up to the light. His first show was a massive success. The gallery was filled with people, and every painting sold. But in the midst of the celebration, a woman approached him, her eyes red from crying. "Your painting of the old church," she whispered. "It's as if you saw my own soul. I have been in a dark place for so long, but when I saw your painting, I saw a light, a promise I had forgotten. I saw a secret garden." Elias knew then that his journey had come full circle. He had been a man who saw the world in shades of grey, but he had been given a new vision, a vision to see the hidden light. He began to understand that his brother's death had not been a tragedy that had stolen his joy, but a trial that had revealed a deeper purpose. He had been given a gift to see the secret gardens of colour in the most ordinary of hearts. His art became a beacon of hope, a testament to the truth that even the most broken of hearts, when held up to the light, can become a masterpiece, revealing a beauty and a grace that is not of this world. As you find your quiet place, let this next story unfold, holding a truth just for you. In a town nestled between rolling hills and a winding river, there lived a man named Samuel. For most of his life, he was known as the keeper of the town's public garden, a place of breathtaking beauty that drew visitors from miles around. His hands were weathered and wise, and he could coax life from the most stubborn of soils. The garden was his masterpiece, a living testament to his life's work. It was a place where people came to find peace, to fall in love, and to watch the seasons turn in a symphony of color. But for Samuel, the beauty had faded. A quiet, lingering sorrow had taken root in his soul, a grief so profound it had sapped the color from his world. He had lost his wife, a woman who had been the very sun of his life, and with her, he felt he had lost the purpose behind his pruning. The vibrant spring blooms and the rich autumn harvest felt like a cruel mockery. He went through the motions, a ghost in the very paradise he had created, but he felt nothing. His own heart, once fertile ground for faith and joy, now felt like fallow, hardened soil. The garden's greatest trial was winter. It was a long, cold season of quiet, of sleeping life. For Samuel, it was the season of his own spiritual barrenness. The trees stood bare, the soil was frozen, and the promise of spring felt like a distant, hollow echo. It was during this endless winter that he noticed a rosebush, an old variety that had been a favorite of his wife's. It was gnarled and prickly, its thorny branches reaching out like a silent plea. It seemed completely dead, a victim of a particularly harsh frost. Its thorns were sharp, but there was no life in its branches. He decided to cut it down. He saw no use in it. It was just a reminder of a beauty that was gone, a life that had been lost. He was tired of caring for things that had no hope of growing. He picked up his pruning shears, their steel cold and heavy in his hand. But just as he was about to make the first cut, a young girl, no older than 8, walked up to him. Her name was Lily, and she was a frequent visitor to the garden. She had a face full of innocence, and a deep, unshakable faith in the magic of the place. "Are you going to make it go away?" she asked, her voice quiet and full of concern. Samuel nodded, not wanting to get into a conversation he couldn't handle. "But it's a beautiful rose," she insisted, "even if it's sleeping." "It's not sleeping," Samuel said, his voice raw with a pain he was tired of hiding. "It's dead. There's no life left in it." Lily looked at the thorny bush, then back at him. "But it's a rose," she said simply. "Roses are never dead, they're just waiting. My daddy says you have to trust the roots, even when you can't see the flowers." Her words, so simple and so full of a profound truth, struck him like a ray of sun. Trust the roots. He had spent his life focused on the visible beauty, the leaves, the petals, the outward signs of life. He had forgotten that the most important work, the work of survival and sustenance, happened unseen in the quiet darkness below the surface. He looked at the dead-looking bush, and a new thought took hold. What if his own faith, his own hope, was not lost but simply dormant, waiting in the darkness? He put down the shears. He knelt before the thorny bush, its branches sharp and unforgiving. With a weary but new resolve, he began the patient, unglamorous work of tending. He cleared away the dead leaves and the broken branches. He pruned it back, not to destroy it, but to give it a chance to grow in the spring. He worked with his hands, not with his heart, which still felt cold and empty. He did it not out of hope, but out of a quiet, tired obedience. He was simply doing the work he had been called to do, even when he couldn't see the purpose. It was a form of silent prayer, an act of faith without feeling. The winter gave way to a cold, wet spring. The ground thawed, and the first green shoots began to appear. But Samuel paid no attention to the rosebush. He had done his part. He had no expectations. He had learned, in his grief, to expect nothing. But one brisk morning, as he walked his usual rounds, a single flash of colour caught his eye. He stopped. From the middle of the thorny, gnarled bush, a single, perfect rose had bloomed. It was a deep, vibrant red, so rich and full of life it seemed to be glowing. It had no companion, no other buds, just a single, perfect flower, a promise fulfilled against all odds. Samuel stood there for a long time, just staring at the rose. It was not a grand miracle, but a small, quiet, personal one. It was a testament to the truth that life can survive in the most unlikely of places. It was a sign that hope can bloom, even in the coldest of seasons. The single rose was a whisper, a gentle confirmation that he had not been forgotten. God had not abandoned the garden, or him. He had been quietly tending to the roots, doing the unseen work, waiting for the perfect moment for life to return. From that day forward, the rosebush became Samuel's favorite part of the garden. Its blossoms were not abundant, but each one was a perfect and precious gift. He began to tell the story of the lone winter rose to the visitors who came. He spoke of its sharp thorns and its dormant state, and he spoke of the quiet trust that had made it bloom again. His own heart, once a barren wasteland, began to stir with a new kind of life. He learned that the most beautiful flowers can grow from the harshest ground, and that the greatest hope can be found not in the absence of winter, but in the quiet promise that lies dormant beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect time to be revealed. He had been a gardener all his life, but it was not until he learned to trust the roots that he finally understood what it meant to truly grow. As you settle in, a new story begins, woven with hope and gentle understanding. In a valley known for its sacred scrolls and ancient artistry, there lived a master calligrapher named Silas. His hands were not just instruments, they were vessels of precision, capable of rendering the most intricate script with a grace that seemed to defy the earthly limitations of ink and parchment. He could make a single word sing with meaning, and a full passage dance with quiet reverence. To hold a scroll touched by Silas was to hold a piece of living beauty. His greatest pride was not in his fame, but in the unwavering perfection of his craft. He believed that a single, stray drop of ink could ruin an entire lifetime of work, so his days were an endless pursuit of flawless execution. But one cold, harsh winter, a cruel fever seized him, and when he finally recovered, his hands were not the same. They shook with a subtle, uncontrollable tremor. The once fluid strokes of his pen now wavered, and the delicate characters he had so painstakingly mastered became clumsy, broken things. He looked at his hands, the very instruments of his life's purpose, and saw only a cruel mockery of what they had been. Despair, like a heavy cloak, settled over him. He locked away his tools, his precious inks and his fine parchment, and retreated from the world, a man whose identity had been shattered. He saw his life's scroll as a finished work, a beautiful creation with a final, ugly blot of ink splashed across its most important passage. He believed his story was over. For months, Silas lived in the shadow of his shattered pride. He became a ghost in his own home, haunted by the memory of his perfect hands. He saw no purpose in his days, no meaning in his craft. His heart was as empty and desolate as the blank scrolls that lay untouched in his workshop. He saw only the ruined, marred pages of his life, and he saw no way to begin again. Then, a messenger from the king arrived at his door, bearing an impossible request. The king's most treasured scroll, a sacred text passed down through generations, had been damaged by a careless servant. An entire section was smudged and ruined by a dark, ugly splotch of ink. The king had searched for a master who could restore it, but no one dared. They said it was a hopeless task, a lost cause, but the king, having heard of Silas's peerless skill, believed he was the only one who could redeem the sacred text. Silas, with a hollow laugh, told the messenger his hands were broken. He told him the task was impossible. The messenger, however, insisted. He said the king believed in a different kind of perfection, one that was not without imperfection. Reluctantly, Silas agreed to try. He took the ruined scroll into his workshop and stared at it for hours. The dark, ugly splotch of ink was a symbol of his own despair, a monument to his brokenness. He saw no way to erase it, no way to restore it to its original, pristine state. He tried a few strokes, but his hand trembled, and the ink bled across the page, making the blemish even worse. He fell to his knees, utterly defeated. In that moment of absolute surrender, when all hope was lost, a thought, clear as a bell, came to him. It was not a voice he heard with his ears, but a knowing in his soul. It was a thought that said, "Do not try to erase the stain. Use it." Silas paused, bewildered by the instruction. His entire life had been about perfection, about the removal of every single blemish. How could he possibly use a mistake? He took a new piece of parchment and a different set of tools, and he sat down to practice. He took his trembling, imperfect hand, and instead of trying to force it to be still, he let it move. He let the ink spill, and in that dark, unexpected chaos, he began to see a new kind of beauty. He began to draw from the mistakes, to use the splatters and the smudges as the beginning of a new design. He used the chaos as a foundation, turning a spilled drop of ink into a magnificent rose, a trembling line into a winding river. He began to see that his broken hands were not a curse, but a different kind of tool, a way to create something entirely new and unique. Silas returned to the sacred scroll. He looked at the ugly, dark splotch that had seemed so hopeless, and he no longer saw a mistake. He saw the potential for a masterpiece. With a quiet confidence, he began to work, not on the pristine, untouched parts of the scroll, but on the ruined section. He used the ink splotch as the beginning of a magnificent, sprawling tree with roots that went deep into the parchment. The trembling lines of his hand became the leaves and the branches, each one unique and perfect in its imperfection. He used the splatters and the smudges to create a small, winding stream and a hidden garden. The finished piece was not a restoration of the original. It was an entirely new work of art, a masterpiece of grace. When he presented the scroll to the king did not gasp at the audacity of the new design. He wept. He saw the beauty and the truth of it. He saw that the most sacred part of the scroll was now the part that had once been considered ruined. He saw that the master had not erased the mistake, but had used it to create something more profound, more beautiful than the original. Silas finally understood. He understood that his life's purpose was not to pursue a flawless perfection, but to allow the great calligrapher to use the messes, the mistakes, and the brokenness to create a new, beautiful story. His hands were not broken, they were being used to tell a different kind of story, a story of redemption, of grace, of a God who does not erase our mistakes but uses them as the foundation for our most beautiful work. His most celebrated work was not the one without a flaw, but the one that was filled with grace. As you find your quiet place, let this next story unfold, holding a truth just for you. In the quiet heartland of America, where the cornfields stretched to meet a wide, generous sky, lived a man named Arthur. He was a luthier, a craftsman of wood and wire, who could coax a story out of a block of maple and a string of steel. For 40 years, his hands had shaped guitars that sang, each one a testament to his patience and skill. He had built instruments for touring musicians and local songwriters, and his workshop, filled with the scent of sawdust and shellac, was a place of quiet reverence. But that was a long time ago. Now his workshop was silent. The tools, once extensions of his soul, lay dusty and still. The air was heavy with the absence of sound, the quiet grief that had settled over him like a perpetual winter. Arthur had lost his wife, Eleanor, to a sudden illness. With her, he felt he had lost the song of his own life. The beauty he once created felt hollow, a pointless pursuit in a world without her laughter. He had put away his tools, turned the key in the lock, and retired to a life of silent solitude. He saw his own life as a ruined instrument, its neck snapped, its body cracked, its song forever silenced. One humid afternoon, as the cicadas hummed a mournful chorus, a young girl appeared at his door. Her name was Lily. She was no older than 17, with a mop of bright red hair and a face smudged with dirt. In her arms, she held a case that was battered and worn, taped together at the corners. She looked at the old man with a desperate, pleading hope in her eyes. "My granddaddy said you were the only one," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He said you were a master." Arthur shook his head, a gesture of weary finality. "I don't do that anymore, kid. My hands aren't what they used to be." Lily didn't move. She just stood there, clutching the case. "Please, sir. It's my granddaddy's guitar. He gave it to me before he passed. It's all I have left of him." Something in her voice, a quiet echo of his own grief, reached him. Reluctantly, he unlatched the case. Inside lay a broken relic. It was a beautiful old Martin acoustic, but it had been through a lifetime of songs and a few too many falls. The neck was snapped clean in half. The soundboard was split, and the back was completely separated from the body. It was beyond repair, a hopeless case. "It's no good, kid," Arthur said, his voice flat. "It's firewood." Lily's eyes welled with tears. "But it still has a song in it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can feel it. It just needs someone to help it sing again." Her words, so simple, so full of faith, struck something deep within him. He saw not just a broken guitar, but a soul clinging to a memory, refusing to believe it was gone forever. He remembered Eleanor, and the countless times she had coaxed him out of his own darkness with a single, simple act of love. He looked at the girl, and against all reason, he heard a small voice in his heart. It wasn't his own voice. It said, "This is not about the wood. It is about the love." He sighed, a long, tired sound. "Leave it," he said, "no promises." Lily's face broke into a radiant smile, a beam of sun in his perpetual winter. She thanked him 1,000 times and left the broken instrument in his hands. Arthur carried the guitar into his workshop, a place that felt more foreign than a new country. He laid it on his workbench, the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. For days he just looked at it. The task was impossible. The cracks were too deep, the wood too old, his hands too unsteady. He saw the flaws, the brokenness, and he saw his own life reflected in its ruined body. He saw his broken heart, his lost song. He picked up a piece of the shattered neck, its edges jagged and splintered. He was filled with a sense of failure before he had even begun. He wanted to hide the imperfections, to make it look as though the guitar had never been broken, as though it had never suffered. But how could he hide the truth? The very wood cried out with its history. He sat there, defeated, a man at the end of his rope. And then, as if from nowhere, a memory came to him, a sacred image. He remembered a time he had found a piece of driftwood on the shore, twisted and gnarled, seemingly useless. But he had cut into it, and inside he had found a core of stunning golden wood, a treasure hidden within a shipwreck. And in that moment of quiet reflection, a new idea took root. What if the flaws were not to be hidden? What if the brokenness was not to be erased, but to be a part of the song? He went to a small wooden box he hadn't opened since Eleanor's passing. Inside were all the tiny treasures he had collected over the years. A small vial of iridescent resin, a sliver of rare abalone shell, and a thin, delicate sheet of mother-of-pearl. He began to work, not to hide the cracks, but to fill them. He began to inlay the shattered lines on the soundboard with the shimmering mother-of-pearl, turning the deep, ugly fissures into winding rivers of light. He used the resin to fuse the broken pieces of the neck, but he didn't try to hide the seam. He made a beautiful, flowing design of gold, a testament to its healing. He polished the body until it glowed, and he saw, for the first time in years, the true beauty of the wood, its grain and its history. The process was long and painstaking. His hands, though still shaky, found a new kind of rhythm. They were not trying to be perfect, they were simply trying to be used. They were no longer the hands of a master craftsman, but the hands of a restorer, of a man who understood that a thing's value is not in its perfection, but in its story. When he was done, the guitar was not as good as new. It was something entirely different, something more beautiful. The body, once splintered, was held together by rivers of light. The neck, once broken, now bore a symbol of grace. It was a one-of-a-kind instrument, a unique testament to brokenness and healing. When Lily returned to his workshop, Arthur handed her the guitar. She took it, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and reverence. She ran her fingers over the mother-of-pearl inlay, tracing the lines of the wood's healing. She brought the guitar to her chest, and with a quiet reverence, she began to play. The sound that came from the instrument was not what it had been before. It was richer, deeper, more profound. It had a voice that sang of loss and sorrow, of healing and hope. It had a story to tell, and it was a story that could only be told by something that had been broken and then made whole again. The song filled the workshop, a melody of grace and redemption, and for the first time in years, Arthur wept. They were not tears of sorrow, but tears of release. He realized that his own life, like the guitar, was a masterpiece in the making, and that his greatest song could only be played by a soul that had known both brokenness and the beauty of being made new again. The silence in his workshop was finally broken, and a new song had begun to sing. If this message resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you're not just supporting us, you're joining our mission to build up the church and create a beautiful community of God's people.